They thought your silence meant you were finished, that you had accepted your place, shrunk your presence, and quietly stepped out of the game. But silence is never empty. Silence is where pressure builds. It is where something dangerous begins to take shape. There's a stage in a man's life where he stops explaining himself. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he finally understands that words are wasted on those who only respect outcomes. This is the moment everything starts to change. Not on the outside, but where it actually matters. Another stage arrives when you realize that attention is a currency, and you've been giving it away for free, to distractions, to people who never earned it, to a world that rewards noise over substance. And in that realization, something inside you begins to withdraw, not out of weakness, but strategy. Then comes the shift. You stop reacting. You stop chasing. You stop proving. The same situations that once triggered you now pass like background noise. People notice. They don't understand it, but they feel it. Because a man who is no longer reactive becomes unpredictable. And that is where power begins. And finally, there is the stage they never see coming. The one where all that silence turns into movement. Quiet, precise, relentless action. No announcements, no warnings, just results. And by the time they realize what you've become, it's already too late to compete. If this message found you, it's not by accident. There's a reason you connected with those words, because at some level, you already know something is shifting inside you. You feel it in the way you observe more than you speak, in the way you question things that once felt normal, in the quiet discomfort that pushes you to want more, but not in the way the world defines more. Most men never reach this point. They stay trapped in cycles of reaction, chasing validation, wasting energy trying to be seen by people who were never worth impressing. They live loud, but empty, busy, but without direction. And slowly, they lose themselves without even realizing it. But you paused. And that pause, that silence, that's where your advantage begins. Because while others are distracted, you are becoming aware. While they seek attention, you are building control. And while they speak endlessly about what they will do, you are getting closer to actually doing it. This is the separation. This is where the path divides. This is not about motivation. It's not about hype. This is about transformation that happens in the dark, without applause, without recognition, without permission. So if you're still here, you're not just watching. You're part of something. A quiet shift. A silent evolution happening in men all over the world who decided they will no longer be average, reactive, or controlled. If you understand this, show it. Like the video. And more importantly, drop your city and country in the comments. Let's see how far this silent movement is reaching. Because you're not alone, even if it feels like you are. There was a time when men were measured by what they could endure, not by how loudly they could be seen. Strength was quiet, discipline was expected, and respect was something you earned over time, not something you demanded instantly. Back then, a man understood that his value was built in silence, through repetition, through consistency, through doing what needed to be done even when no one was watching. Today, everything is reversed. The modern world rewards visibility over substance. It teaches men to broadcast every move, to chase attention, to seek validation before they've even built anything worth validating. And slowly, without realizing it, many lose the very thing that once made them powerful: focus. Because attention is no longer directed inward. It's scattered outward. You see it everywhere. Men reacting to everything, arguing, proving, explaining, defending, constantly pulled into noise that adds nothing to their growth. And the more they engage, the more they drain themselves. Energy that could have been used to build is wasted, trying to be understood. But the man who steps back, the one who chooses silence, begins to see what others can't. He realizes that not every battle deserves his energy, that not every opinion requires a response, that the strongest position is often the one that remains unmoved. And in that realization, he regains control, not over others, but over.
There is a version of you that reacts instantly. That version gets triggered, pulled into arguments, distracted by opinions, and controlled by emotions that don't serve him. Most men live there permanently, on edge, easily influenced, constantly shifting based on what happens around them. That is not power. That is exposure. Because when anyone can trigger you, they can control you. And control doesn't always. There is a version of you that reacts instantly. That version gets triggered, pulled into arguments, distracted by opinions, and controlled by emotions that don't serve him. Most won't notice at first. They'll think you've become distant, detached, maybe even weaker. But what they don't understand is that you're no longer playing the same game. You've changed the rules internally, and that changes everything. There comes a point where a man realizes that being available to everyone is the fastest way to become valuable to no one. Constant access destroys mystery, it weakens presence, and over time it conditions others to see you as predictable, replaceable. In the past, a man's time was guarded, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. He understood that every moment spent was a piece of his life exchanged, and he chose carefully where that energy went. Today, that awareness is rare. Time is given away casually to endless scrolling, empty conversations, and people who bring no direction into a man's life, and the cost is invisible at first. You don't notice it in a single day. But over weeks, months, years, it compounds. Lost focus, lost discipline, lost edge. Until one day, a man looks at his life and realizes he's been busy, but not progressing. That's the trap. Because movement is not the same as growth. The man who begins to wake up to this doesn't make noise about it. He doesn't announce that he's changing. He simply starts cutting things off. Less access, fewer words, more intention. And suddenly, the same people who ignored his presence start noticing his absence. That's when the shift becomes visible, not because he demanded attention, but because he removed it. And removal is powerful. It forces people to feel what they once took for granted. It creates space, it builds tension, and more importantly, it gives him something most men never truly have: control over his own time. From that point forward, everything becomes sharper. His decisions carry weight, his actions become deliberate, his circle gets smaller, but stronger. And while others continue to spread themselves thin, he becomes concentrated, focused, dangerous in a way that doesn't need to be explained, because a man who controls his time controls his direction. Most men are taught to chase success, chase attention, chase approval. And without realizing it, they build their entire identity around pursuit, always reaching, always wanting, always feeling like they're one step behind something they can never quite catch. But chasing creates a hidden problem. It puts you in a permanent state of reaction. You move based on what others have, what others think, what others expect. Your direction is no longer your own. It's influenced, shaped, and often controlled by forces you don't even question. And the more you chase, the more you reinforce the belief that what you need is somewhere outside of you. That's where most men lose, because they never stop long enough to ask a simple question. Why am I chasing this in the first place? The man who begins to shift doesn't run faster, he stops. And in that stillness, he starts to see clearly. He realizes that the constant need to prove himself was never strength, it was dependency.
A need for validation disguised as ambition, and once he sees it, he can't unsee it. That's when everything changes. He no longer seeks approval. He no longer performs for an audience. His actions are no longer driven by the need to be recognized, but by the need to become quietly, consistently, without external pressure. And something unexpected happens. The moment he stops chasing, things start coming to him. Not because of luck, not because of magic, but because he has become aligned, focused, grounded. His presence shifts, his energy becomes different, and people feel it even if they can't explain it. Opportunities begin to appear. Respect begins to grow, not loudly, but steadily. Because a man who is no longer chasing is finally in control of where he stands. There is a version of you that reacts instantly. That version gets triggered, pulled into arguments, distracted by opinions, and controlled by emotions that don't serve him. Most men live there permanently, on edge, easily influenced, constantly shifting based on what happens around them. That is not power, that is exposure. Because when anyone can trigger you, they can control you. And control doesn't always.
Come through force. It comes through manipulation of your attention, your emotions, your focus. The modern world thrives on this. It feeds off reaction. It rewards impulsiveness. It keeps men in a constant loop of responding instead of directing. But the man who understands this begins to separate himself, not by running away, but by mastering his internal state. He learns to pause, and that pause becomes his weapon. In that space between stimulus and response, he gains clarity. He sees the situation for what it is, not for how it feels in the moment. He chooses his reaction instead of being owned by it. And over time, that single habit builds something most people never develop: emotional discipline. The discipline changes everything. Because now, pressure doesn't break him. Conflict doesn't shake him. Noise doesn't distract him. He becomes stable in a world that is constantly trying to destabilize him. And that stability is rare, which makes it powerful. People begin to notice it, even if they don't understand it. They test him, push him, try to get a reaction. And when none comes, it unsettles them. Because they're used to controlling others through emotion. But with him, that door is closed. He is no longer available for manipulation. And once a man reaches that point, he becomes something different. Not louder, not more aggressive, just unshakable. There is a discipline that no one applauds, no audience, no recognition, no immediate reward. It's the discipline of doing what must be done, especially when you don't feel like doing it. Most men fail here, not because they lack ability, but because they rely on motivation, and motivation is unstable. It comes and goes. It depends on mood, on circumstances, on external stimulation. When it's there, they move. When it's gone, they stop. That inconsistency keeps them average, because progress doesn't come from intensity. It comes from repetition. The man who separates himself understands this early. He stops waiting to feel ready. He stops negotiating with his own excuses. He builds a system where action happens regardless of emotion. Tired or not, inspired or not, watched or not. And at first, it's uncomfortable, because he's breaking a pattern that most people never question. He's choosing structure over impulse, commitment over convenience. And every time he follows through, even when it's difficult, he reinforces something deeper than motivation: identity. He becomes the kind of man who does what he says. That changes everything. Because now, confidence is no longer something he tries to project. It's something he experiences daily through his own actions, quietly, internally, without needing validation. While others are starting and stopping, he continues. While others are distracted, he is consistent. And over time, that gap becomes impossible to ignore. People will call it discipline, some will call it obsession, others won't understand it at all.
But the truth is simpler. He made a decision to stop negotiating with himself. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. Because a man who controls his actions eventually controls his entire life. Most men talk too much. Not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they feel the need to be seen, to be heard, to constantly remind the world of their presence. They explain their plans, announce their goals, and describe the life they intend to build, long before they've taken the actions required to earn it. And in doing so, they weaken themselves. Because every time you speak without backing it with action, you release pressure. You satisfy your mind with the illusion of progress. You feel productive without actually producing anything. And over time, that habit becomes dangerous. It creates a man who sounds capable, but isn't. The man who evolves understands this. He becomes more reserved, not out of insecurity, but out of precision. He speaks less because he knows that words carry weight, and weight should not be wasted. When he says something, it means something. When he commits, it's already in motion. There is no gap between what he says and what he does. That alignment builds trust, not just with others, but within himself. And self-trust is rare, because most men have broken their own word too many times. They promise, delay, excuse, and repeat, until eventually, even they stop believing themselves. That's where confidence
collapses internally, long before it shows externally. But the man who rebuilds that trust does it quietly. He stops overpromising, stops explaining, stops seeking approval for things that are not yet real. Instead, he focuses on execution, step by step, without noise, and something shifts. People begin to notice results without ever hearing the process. They see progress without the announcements, and that contrast creates impact. Because in a world full of talkers, the one who moves in silence stands out the most, not because he demands attention, but because his results make it impossible to ignore. There is a loneliness that most men try to avoid. They fill their time with noise, surround themselves with people, chase constant interaction. Not because it adds value, but because silence forces them to face something they're not ready to confront. Themselves. Distraction becomes their escape. But the man who grows walks straight into that silence. At first, it's uncomfortable. There's no validation, no external feedback, no one telling him he's on the right path. Just his thoughts, his doubts, his unfinished potential staring back at him. And for many, that's too much to handle. So they run back to noise, back to comfort, back to the familiar patterns that keep them exactly where they are. But the one who stays changes. Because in that isolation, something powerful happens. He begins to understand himself. Not the version shaped by others, not the one performing for approval, but the real one. The one with flaws, strengths, fears, and untapped ability. And with that awareness comes clarity. He starts to see what needs to be removed, what needs to be built, what no longer belongs in his life. And those decisions, they're not easy. Cutting ties, changing habits, stepping away from environments that once felt normal. It requires strength that most people never develop. But that's the price of growth. Isolation is not punishment, it's preparation. It strips away distraction and forces focus. It builds resilience. It sharpens discipline, and most importantly, it creates independence, mentally, emotionally, and strategically. So when he returns to the world, he's not the same. He doesn't seek company to fill a void.
He chooses it, if it aligns. And that difference is everything. Because a man who is comfortable alone is no longer controlled by the need for others. There is a shift that happens when a man stops needing recognition, not pretending he doesn't want it, but truly detaching from it. No longer measuring his progress by applause, no longer questioning his value based on how others respond, just moving forward, regardless of who is watching or not. Most never reach this point, because recognition is addictive. From a young age, men are conditioned to seek it. Approval from family, validation from peers, attention from strangers. And over time, that need becomes embedded so deeply that their actions are no longer their own. They are performances designed to trigger a response. That's the trap. Because when recognition becomes the goal, authenticity disappears. The man who breaks free from this doesn't make an announcement. He doesn't declare that he's different now. He simply stops performing, stops adjusting himself to fit expectations, stops chasing reactions. And in that silence, he becomes real. His actions are no longer influenced by how they will be perceived. He does things because they need to be done, because they align with who he is building, not because they will be seen, liked, or praised. That kind of detachment creates power. Because now, rejection doesn't shake him, criticism doesn't redirect him, lack of attention doesn't slow him down. He is no longer dependent on external signals to continue moving forward. And that independence is rare. People begin to notice it, not through what he says, but through what he doesn't do. He doesn't seek validation, doesn't compete for attention, doesn't react to things that once would have pulled him in. He just continues, steady, focused, unaffected. And over time, that consistency builds something stronger than recognition ever could. Respect. The kind that isn't requested, the kind that isn't forced, the kind that simply exists. Because a man who no longer needs to be seen becomes impossible to overlook. There is a point where a man stops blaming, no more pointing at circumstances, no more holding.
Onto what others did or didn't do. No more waiting for fairness, for recognition, for things to line up before he finally moves. That mindset dies here. Because blame feels justified, but it keeps you stuck. It gives you a reason to stay the same, a reason to delay, a reason to avoid responsibility for the direction of your own life. And as long as that mindset exists, progress will always be limited, no matter how capable you are. The man who evolves makes a hard decision. He takes ownership of everything. Not because everything was his fault, but because everything is now his responsibility. That shift is heavy. It removes excuses, it removes comfort. It forces him to face the reality that if nothing changes, it's on him. No one is coming to fix it. No one is going to carry the weight for him. And for many, that realization is overwhelming, but for him, it's freeing. Because responsibility brings control. The moment he stops blaming, he regains power over his actions, over his decisions, over his future. He is no longer waiting. He is building. Step by step, mistake by mistake, adjustment by adjustment. And yes, he will fail. But failure no longer defines him. It teaches him, refines him, strengthens him. While others stay trapped in cycles of complaint, he moves forward with clarity. No excuses, no shortcuts, no dependency, just ownership. And that ownership creates something unshakable.
Because when a man fully accepts responsibility for his life, he becomes the only variable that matters. At the end of all this, there is no announcement. No moment where the world stops to recognize what you've become. No applause waiting for you. No validation guaranteed. Just a quiet reality. You are no longer who you used to be. And that's enough. Most people expect transformation to feel dramatic, to look like a breakthrough, a visible shift that everyone can see and acknowledge. But real change doesn't work like that. It happens slowly, quietly, beneath the surface, until one day, your standards are different, your habits are different, your mindset is different, and there's no going back. You've crossed a line internally, and that line changes how you move. You no longer tolerate what once drained you. You no longer engage in things that don't serve your direction. Your time is protected. Your energy is intentional. Your focus is locked in. Not because someone told you to live this way, but because you've experienced the cost of not living this way. That awareness stays with you. People from your past may not understand it. They might try to pull you back into old patterns, old conversations, old versions of yourself that no longer exist. And for a moment, you'll see the contrast clearly. Who you were and who you've become. And in that moment, you make a silent decision. You keep moving forward, no explanations, no justifications, no need to be understood. Because this path was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to be earned. Step by step, choice by choice, day by day, until eventually, without ever needing to say it, you become exactly what they never expected. A man who doesn't need noise to prove his power. A man who doesn't need approval to confirm his worth. A man who built himself in silence. Now you understand. This was never about becoming louder, faster, or more visible than everyone else. It was about becoming sharper, more disciplined, more controlled. The kind of man who doesn't break under pressure, but uses it. Because the truth is simple. Most will hear this and feel motivated for a moment. Then they'll go back to old habits, old patterns, old excuses. The cycle will continue, and nothing will change. But a few will take this personally. They won't talk about it. They won't announce it. They'll just disappear for a while and start building, quietly, consistently, without needing anyone to understand what they're doing. That's where you decide who you are. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient now. Because every day you delay, you reinforce the version of yourself you're trying to leave behind. So take the silence seriously. Protect it. Use it. Build inside it. And when the time comes to move, move without hesitation. No warnings. No noise. Just results.